Hi, y'all. Welcome to the saloon. Episode 4, Shiloh Saloon Stories, focuses on the Fiddler. Who's the Fiddler? Well, the Fiddler is Julien Mayfair, or so it seems. You know, seems like every once in a while, in a town full of musicians, where there's a lot of music going on, if a big hotshot moves in that's a really, really killer player, the whole town and all the musicians in it definitely take notice. That's what happened when Julien Mayfair came to Wichita, Kansas. He arrived in town about the same time I did, early 2000. Well, Julien was the talk of the town. He was a fiddle player. Not only that, but he was a really, really killer guitar player. He could play a lot of stuff. Piano, bass, just an all-around awesome musician. So, you may remember in the first episode of Shiloh Saloon Stories, me talking about meeting Barry Harris. He was playing at a gig across the street from my gig in Derby, Kansas. And when I went in to see him play on my break, he was playing with a band. And in that band, there was a fiddle player. Well, Julien Mayfair happened to be that fiddle player, which you heard me talk about. And also, you may have heard me talk about him playing with Ray Drew, who is another blues man I'll feature in an upcoming episode of Shiloh Saloon Stories. But Julien was first time I met him, he was playing with Barry Harris. And then later, a little bit later, he would play with another blues man, Ray Drew. So, I'd heard about Julien. I'd seen him around town playing, but we hadn't met. And there was a little place in Wichita called the River's Edge. It was a popular club for musicians to hang out at. And one day I was down there playing, and I think I had a gig or afternoon gig down there or whatnot. And when I took a break and went on the patio, I noticed Julien and his girlfriend, whose name was Donna, who was a very, very sweet woman when she wasn't under the influence of alcohol. Well, it turned out that he had heard about me and kind of had been scoping me out as much as I had been scoping him out, and finally decided to come to one of my shows and introduce himself. So that started a friendship right off the bat. We found out that we had common interests, that we were into the same kind of music and musicians, and we just hit it off. So it turns out that Julien was living with his girlfriend Donna at this storage unit in town. I don't mean they were living inside a storage unit. It's just that there was a big building downtown, and it contained all these little storage units in it. Well, there was also like a little house, kind of like a housing part, little apartment within this building where Donna and Julien stayed. So, once we became friends and started hanging out a lot, what we would do is just basically meet at the storage unit and sit around, play music, talk, get to know each other, all that kind of stuff. Around that time, too, we were smoking a massive amounts of weed. That was a big part of the commonality between me and Julien. We both liked to smoke a lot of weed. So we would smoke a lot of weed, hang out at the storage unit, and in the daytime, we found ourselves starting to look for gigs. I mean, I remember riding out in rural Kansas with Julien. For some reason, we got it in our heads that all the gigs would be out in rural Kansas, out in the middle of nowhere, because they never had music. There were never bands coming through. I can remember just riding aimlessly out in the country with Julien, trying to find places to play, and then coming back to the storage unit and plotting it all out. The storage building was like our base of operations. We recorded some songs there. We, planned and conspired. We played music there, the whole building. I think you get the picture. So anyway, it wasn't long till Around that time, I had went out to Wichita, Kansas with a girl, and the girl and I ended up splitting apart. So I found myself by myself in Wichita and kind of falling on rough times, if you know what I mean. So, to get money, Julien was the first person that I ever. Let me start back. To get money, we came up with this plan that around happy hour, at 5 o'clock or so, we would go and proposition these bars in town, these little working man bars, and we go in there and say, look, you know, we'll come in here with acoustic guitar, no amplifiers, no PA, none of that, and he'll play fiddle and we'll sing. And y'all don't have to pay us a thing. We just want to come in here and do this for about an hour and just allow us to pass the hat. And I mean, we would hit up club after club after club like that. And it became a thing where we were going during the day and, you know, playing at these clubs late afternoon. And hell, in an hour, I mean, we'd make probably close to $100 between us, you know. So we play that one, go to the next club, make another $100. Pretty easy money. And Julien was also the first time I ever experienced or tried to busk, and the only time I've ever busked, as they call it, which is, if you don't know what busking is, it's when you go out and play on the street and you play for tips. Play street music, basically. Well, there was this club, there was a part of Wichita downtown called Old Town. And on the weekends, it's where all the young cats went. You know, there were all these big meat markets down there, basically, is what I call them. And just places for people to go hook up, I guess, you know, just really crappy bars that played really crappy, you know, bad music that was on the radio, that kind of thing. But we figured out that there were so many people down there that what you could do is go down there and I guess we were the only people that got hit to this. But we would just take my guitar, I'd take my guitar, or he'd take Julian played guitar too, so he'd take an acoustic guitar or fiddle. Most of the time fiddle, because that kind of got people's attention. And we just sit down there and wait at 2 o'clock in the morning for the clubs to let out. Because, man, we figured out we could make some serious money doing this. I mean, literally like $200 or $300 within an hour, you know, which was serious money for you know, an hour worth of busking. Because when these clubs would let out, if you were strategic enough and placed yourself in front of one of the ones that held like, you know, 400, 500 people, they all came out at one time. And the first thing they would see is, ha. So we made a lot of money that way. So, you know, basically if we didn't have a gig that night, or if I didn't have a gig, you know, I played by myself around this time. I hadn't really played with a band yet. I was playing more solo or duo stuff with Julien being the person playing with me, or Cliff Major, like I talked about in the last episode, who would play stand-up bass with me sometimes. But you know, during the day, during the night, if we didn't have a gig, we just go busk, you know. And during the day, like on a weekday, if there were no gigs, we just go hit up the bars and say, "Hey, want some free entertainment?" So that's basically what happened. You know, but Julien was a person of mystery, and I really don't have a lot of backstory on him, and that's why I'm kind of telling more of the experiences that I had with him. He was just a figure that kind of appeared and just came out of nowhere. No one knew anything about him. I have no idea about his background or anything like that. All I can go off of are the crazy experiences that I had with him and his excellent musicianship. You know, we would start, you know, we would play some clubs together. One of the clubs that Julien and I kind of really started getting to know each other musically when we would play out, one of the first clubs we played together was a place called Lenora's. And it was a bar and grill in Wichita. But the catch is that the youngest person there was probably 65 years old, you know. It's a bunch of old folks. And, you know, I knew that going into the gig. But, I didn't know that they'd be wild old folks. And that's what they were. They were a wild, rowdy bunch of old folks. These old people could party a lot better than a lot of the young people I've met. But anyway, after about the first time in there, we discovered the first night how wild this place was. I had started talking to the audience and having a good time, and everybody was laughing and everything like that. And I started kind of I said, y'all don't mind a little risque stuff, do you? Oh, no, 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 no. I said, because I wrote this song, and I wrote it with a friend of mine named Max Drake years before, a couple of years back in 1998, before I came to Wichita, as a joke. We did it as a joke. This song called Big Dick Daddy. And you can probably imagine all of the lyrics to the song and all the little plays on words and all the goofy stuff. That's not the point of it. I started playing this Big Dick Daddy song, and Julien's playing with me. And, I'm laughing and stuff. I'm not really paying attention, but everybody's having a good time and laughing along too. Well, I didn't realize up to a point they weren't laughing at my song. And I also realized up to a point that there was an older gentleman that was the cook in the back of the where the kitchen was, coming out of the back of the restaurant where that kitchen back there, coming back from the back of the room up to the front of the room where we were playing. And he had this towel. He had an apron on, but where the apron ties, he had a towel tucked in there with it kind of drooped down. And everybody's laughing, and I guess they knew this prank from maybe another musician playing there or whatnot. But as he got to where we were playing, which was I guess the bandstand, there wasn't really a bandstand per se. He flips it up, and it's this big long schlong, and it's got a wig for hair and the whole thing. So they basically acted out Big Dick Daddy. I'll never forget it. I got a picture I'll include in here. I had to get a pic, but of the dick. But anyway, not long after that, of us playing together, I met my bass player that I played with the whole time I was in Wichita, Jesse Major. He and Julie and I started a band called the Charlies. And don't ask me where we got that name. I can't even remember now. But stand-up bass, fiddle. Julien also played this thing called a banjolin that he carried around from time to time. It was like a banjo body, but with like a mandolin neck. I learned how to play it for a short little while. I would play sometimes play a couple songs on it at night. But we started doing that for a while, and got some good attention doing that, and kind of some notoriety. Things started, I guess, Julien's layers of revealing started revealing the layers of Julien started revealing themselves to me as time went on. I'll never forget, he had made a name for himself around town, as I said, as a hot guitar player, fiddle player, the whole thing. There used to be a bar named Kara's down from my house that used to play, and it's basically kind of like a bar where I just kind of hung out. And one afternoon, I went down there to get a beer or something, and the bartender there, I can't remember what his name was, he says, "Hey man, I saw your fiddle player the other night at an open mic." I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Julien." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah man." He said he was dressed up like a woman. And I said, "Oh," I said, "you must be confused." I said, "Must be another person in town that plays fiddle or something." I said, "I don't think he dresses like a woman." "Oh, yeah. He had a dress on and high heels, had his face in makeup, the whole deal." I'm going, there's no way. Downtown Wichita, one of the places that Julie and I used to kind of frequent, I was big into the Goodwills and stuff back then, secondhand shops to find cool shirts and whatnot, vintage shirts, jackets. And there was one close to the storage building. And one day we went down there, and I lost Julien in the store. I couldn't find him. And I look over, and he's in the women's section. And I kind of waited for him for a while, and then, I was ready to go. So I went over and said, "Hey, man, what's up?" And he goes, God, he kind of startled me. He goes, "Oh, I'm over here looking for clothes for Donna. I'm over here looking for clothes for Donna." I said, "Oh, okay, but no big deal." So we check out and everything, walk out of the store, and I said, "Hey, man," I said, "let me ask you a question." I said, "A guy at this bar the other night told me that he saw you dressed up as a woman playing fiddle. Is that true?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, totally true. Yeah." He said, "I'm not gay or anything, but sometimes I like to cross dress. Sometimes I dress up like a woman." I said, "Hey, man," I said, "no big deal, but, I kind of was like, hey, man, why didn't you tell me?" So I'd have to find out secondhand. And, anyway, I didn't care, it didn't affect my friendship with him one bit. In fact, I never, the whole time we were friends, never saw him cross dress. So anyway, if he did, it wouldn't have made a difference to me. Well, around that time also, I started learning other things about Julien. Like, Julien Mayfair wasn't even his name. He had taken that name from an Anne Rice book. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, Julien Mayfair was like the name of a witch, come to find out, in an Anne Rice novel. Anne Rice, you may be familiar with the, Interview with the Vampire. I guess he was into the Anne Rice stuff. So he had named himself after this witch named Julien Mayfair. I guess he liked the name and the way it rang or whatever. I think his real name was David. I can't remember what his last name was. But that wasn't all I started noticing. This guy was a fabulous musician. I mean, God, he could just play circles around me back then. I remember that he taught me things. He was the only person really that ever taught me about country guitar. And back then, I didn't really apply that. But I do now. I play a lot of country style guitar from time to time with my music. And I always revert back to what Julien taught me, basically right before. I think it was inside one of those bars while we were playing for tips, basically. He just said, "Hey, do this and do this behind me, and, you'll be playing country music." So learned a lot that way. But also I started realizing that this guy, he had some stuff going on in his life. And one was his girlfriend, Donna, who was the sweetest lady, the most rational lady, fun to talk to, interesting conversationalist. But man, I mean, if she sniffed a little whiff of beer, which I'm going to take a drink of. If she even smelled a beer, man, she could drink one and she would turn into this paranoid person. The next beer, man, she might be on top of you, screaming at you and threatening to kill you. I mean, that's just the way it was. So, and I started realizing that she was way out of control. Things like for example, one day I go over to their storage building where they live, the storage units, and Donna tells me that a couple days ago she went into the Dollar General and forgot to put out the incense she had lit in her car. They had a brand new Blazer. Excuse me, it wasn't a car, it was a Blazer. And when she came out of the store, she was met by the Blazer in flames. She totally burnt the car to a crisp. They couldn't even save it if they tried. But, lucky for her, her father actually was an engineer. He had passed, long past, but he was an engineer for NASA. And her parents were well off, and lucky for them, they ended up getting this, what do you call those cars? I can't remember. Anyway, I'll remember it. A Crown Vic, that's what it was. A Crown Vic. She gets this Crown Vic. It's brand new, basically. And they give them that to drive around in because the car burned up. But it was wild. I mean, her when I was over at their house, at the parents' house one time, I noticed on the wall that her dad, the engineer of NASA, actually had a letter. They had a letter framed on the wall, signed, that was written to him from John F. Kennedy. So, pretty neat stuff. But their relationship. I also started realizing that Julien and Donna's relationship was kind of included some domestic abuse, and not that he was abusive by any means. It was more of her being the aggressor. You know, as time went on, and I developed a band and whatnot. You know, Julian sometimes would come and play with me, and Donna would drop him off at the club, and she'd come in, and it'd be, oh, hey, you know, nice and everything. And man, it's 1:45 in the morning, man, she'd come through that bar, and holy shit. Everybody, I mean, within the first 5 minutes, she had 6 people at the bar that were like ready to kill her. You know what I mean? So it was bad, you know. I mean, there was one evening that Julian showed up, and his tooth was missing here. And they had a parrot. I'll give him that. But I said, what happened to your teeth? He said, oh, my parrot knocked it out. I don't know. But anyway, around that time, we would just, you know, we had the greatest times together. During the day, we would hook up with a blues man who moved to town, more of an elder blues man, Ray Drew. But his brother was a lot younger, Tony. And so Tony and Julie and I developed a really good friendship, and we would just ride around all day, hang out at Tony's house or Julian's house, and pass the dobro around and play songs for each other. Smoke a lot of weed. That was a big thing. You know, but around that time, you know, like I said, Ray, Tony's brother, Ray, the elder blues guy, the old blues man, Julian played with him quite a bit. So, you know, we kind of had this little network of friends and musicians going on. I'll never forget the Wichita Blues Society had this thing called the Blues Crawl that they would do. It was like seasonally. And I'll never forget, once during their blues crawl, we got upset, me and Julian and all the old blues men in town, that they didn't add anybody, like any of the old blues guys, like Barry or Ray Drew or Jesse Anderson. There was none of them. It was just a bunch of, like, you know, pseudo blues bands that were really just bad rock bands, pretty much. And, you know, the storage units were downtown where the blues crawl was going to be. It was a bunch of bars that took place in this blues crawl. We were very close to all these bars, so we decided we were close enough that Julie and I were going to throw our own blues festival in the middle of the blues crawl and have all the old blues guys come and play. So that's what we ended up doing. Ray Drew showed up, Barry showed up, all the other guys, a lot of the guys that played that were sidemen, Chico. But anyway, that was just a funny thing and kind of a big fuck you to the Blues Society, which, you know, I'm sure they do great things for the blues and everything, but I've just always thought it was such a kind of a hokey thing. But we had a lot of fun with that. Well, you know, things got crazy. Donna kept running her mouth and acting wild, and she finally met her match. Tony, Ray Drew's brother, I remember I wasn't there, but apparently he and his girlfriend came over to Julian and Donna's place one day, and Donna started drinking. And the next thing you know, boy, she must have popped off and said something, because Tony's girlfriend, I think, broke her ribs, blackened her eye, and busted her lip pretty good. And that was before they had to basically pull her off of Donna. Sheesh. Anyway, just some wild stuff. I'll never forget one time Julian and I and Jesse, we were playing somewhere in like Dodge, Kansas or something, some rural place, you know, out in the middle of nowhere. And on the break, this guy comes in and says that he's Garth Brook's guitar player. And, you know, people say stuff all the time. I don't believe anything. You know, my great uncle told me, believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. And it's got me through pretty good, but not on this occasion. I was kind of an asshole. You know, I was 23 years old, something like that. And, you know, Julie introduced me to this guy and said, hey, he's Garth Brook's guitar player. He wants to sit in on the next set. Can he sit in? I thought, oh, yeah, sure, you know, whatever. So he comes up there, and I'm, you know, put him through the blues test, you know, and he comes out okay. But, of course, in my 23-year-old mind, he's not authentic enough. you know, because that's how stupid I was back then, in a way. But anyway, I thought he was kind of crappy. I was kind of rude to him and stuff. And like a week later, the Grammys are on TV. And lo and behold, guess who's playing that night? Garth Brooks. He's up for award. He won like 29 Grammys or whatever it is before he became that rock star guy. But anyway, I'm sitting there watching the Grammys, and I thought, okay, well, you know, I'm sitting there watching his performance, and I'll be goddamn. Guess who's on guitar? You know, Mr. Non-Authentic Blues guy who probably thought to himself, this young prick, he don't know shit from Shinola. I'm playing with Garth Brooks. So we kept gigging, having a good time, me and Julian. Like I said, we recorded some music. It's put up in the vaults of all the stuff I've recorded. I'd really like to hear. I thought about it recently as I was prepping for this episode. I thought to myself, man, I'd like to hear some of that music we recorded because it was all original. But I'll never forget another Donna story. One time we got hired to play this private party for some young cats that were my age, in their 20s, two brothers. And Donna agreed to take us to this party and drop us off because her parents lived in the neighborhood. So we get to the party, and there's about, I don't know, 60 people or so there. We're having a good time, laughing, drinking, and everything's fine. We're playing music, and on our break, a fight, about 3/4 through the night, a fight breaks out between the two brothers. And they start beating the shit out of each other and the whole damn thing, and it's awful, and everybody leaves the party pretty much. I mean, it clears the party. Except for me and Julian, who have no ride because we're at the mercy of Donna, who showed up about 30 minutes later to pick us up, or an hour later. The brothers, me and Julian and I had somehow figured out how to calm these two brothers down, and we talked to them. Hey, man, y'all brothers, you don't beat the shit out of his nose and everything like that. And you don't pop him in the eye, and don't do that kind of stuff. Y'all try to get along. And so anyway, they ended up getting along, and everything had chilled out. Basically, everything had chilled out, and we were sitting there. I think we were smoking a joint, whatever. Here comes Donna. Here comes Donna. And she rolls up in her Crown Vic, comes inside. She's fine. We can tell she's a little sauce, but she's okay until one of the brothers says something. I don't even know what he said. It was nothing even inflammatory. She looked at him with some cold, hard shit and lunged for him. Went after the brother. So here we are. We're having to get Donna off the brother. The two brothers have finally made friends again. And here we are tearing them apart. It was absolutely crazy. So, I mean, it was just so obvious that they were living on the fringe, man. I mean, they were living on the edge, and I don't like wild times and good stuff like that. But, that night when she took us home, I remember she was driving so fast that when we got off the off-ramp, I was in the back seat, and she was going 60 miles an hour. I don't like living close to the edge like that. And, man, I mean, I guess Julian didn't either, because he ended up moving back to St. Louis not long after that. He was done. He'd had enough, I guess, I would see Donna after Julian moved to St. Louis or wherever he moved. I would see her from time to time riding around in that Crown Vic. I think the first time I saw her, it was missing, like the side rear view mirror was hanging off of it. About a month later, I saw her, and then, like a headlight was knocked out. And then I'd see her a little later, and like the whole side panel of the car, or the front of the car would be missing. And on until basically I saw her one day and she was walking. So I don't know what became of her, and I don't know what became of Julian. I really wish I knew. I've looked on social media for him under the name Julien Mayfair, since that's the only name I know other than David, but no luck. So I really would like to catch him again. I have no idea if he's even alive still, but if you're out there and you see this, look me up. Go to my website or something. I'd love to pick one with you again. Well, that's all I got for this week. If you like this stuff, chances are you might like my other shows. I've got a show called The Friday Night Gamble. It's a variety show that highlights North Carolina songwriters, musicians, and it's also has a little bit of comedy to it, skits, stuff like that, wild characters. Check it out. Also, you might like Out of Control Vintage. It's about people like me that are hopeless vintage guitar addicts and amp addicts. Feature a different guitar amp on there every week, or a vintage guitar store, sometimes just some equipment that my buddies own. So if you like that stuff, if you're looking to get into the vintage guitar amp market, this is a good way to get into it because I don't pitch, $35,000 Telecasters at you. But if you want to find that stuff and you want to be sure to know when these episodes are coming out, you got to subscribe and remember to hit that notification bell. So anytime I release one of these, hey, YouTube will let you know. Well, I appreciate you stopping by the saloon. I hope you have a good weekend, and I hope to see you again soon. That's all from me. Bye.